to close and increase the likelihood of rolling blackouts as the Obama administration's vow to bankrupt the coal industry takes full effect. Now, of course, we reported on this several times earlier this year on Texas, the key state where more than 50% of power comes from the coal plants, all kinds of insider deals going on with that. But here today, the Austin American-Statesman admits what the White House and others said we were lying about previously. 10 months down the line, and the Austin American-Statesman reports today that Texas could face power shortages as soon as next year as aging plants are mothballed in response to new environmental standards, according to the state's grid operator and the organization that monitors U.S. power grids for the feds. The report by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation found that many older power plants in Texas will be retired rather than retrofitted to meet new federal emission standards, reports the Statesman. And then from the Statesman itself, it gets into how many of the well-meaning environmentalist groups are helping to really economically squeeze America even further. Of course, it's not just Texas with these coal plants. They supply to many other states. Environmental groups, however, argued that reserves are generally sufficient and will be augmented by energy-efficient measures and new power supplies already being planned. A recent report by the Clean Energy Group Consortium notes that the power providers have other means of handling the state's needs, such as offering customers discounts in exchange for curtailing their electric use when demand is straining the grid. So you've got all this phony environmentalism, the climate change lies, and more, but now they're actually going to be clamping down on industry and American consumption through it. Not that that's entirely a bad deal, but the way they're doing it fits with Agenda 21 and more. So that's in the Austin American-Statesman today. And just to remind you, Alex Jones did several reports breaking this down. Again, the White House accused him of lying about it. We're going to play one of those reports right now.
Obama hit struggling Americans with energy rate hikes. Following Barack Obama's vow to bankrupt the coal power industry, Americans are set to be hit with a wave of utility bill hikes as draconian EPA regulations drive up the cost of energy.
So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
The Obama administration's crusade against coal-fired power plants, which was launched on the back of discredited junk science about hyped global warming threats, has little to do with improving the environment and everything to do with lowering living standards by creating artificial scarcity. The EPA has now listed as harmful carbon dioxide that is part of the life cycle of the planet. New EPA rules dictate that utility companies will be forced to spend an initial outlay of $800 million to conform with regulations that mandate harmful emissions be reduced under the Clean Air Act. And yet power plants supplied by General Electric, one of Barack Obama's biggest campaign contributors, have received an EPA waiver and will not be subject to the new regulations. The new rules will exacerbate the problem of rolling blackouts, warns Donna Nelson, head of the Texas Public Utility Commission. Nelson said, quote, "I have no doubt in my mind that this rule will result in reliability issues and rolling outages in Texas." Obama's strict enforcement of draconian EPA regulations has led to new clean-burning coal-fired plants being mothballed and other existing ones being shut down, which has in turn led to Texas and other states becoming energy dependent. All of this, of course, will lead to significantly higher utility bills for U.S. citizens who are being assaulted with more and more expenses, even as the threat of a double-dip recession lowers living standards.
And so how many different ways in the midst of this vast economic global crisis have they said that it's the populations who have to pay for all these problems, whether it's economic or environmental or what have you, while the banks get all these secret insider loans and much worse. Now, we also have a report that Darren McBreen filed on this subject a few months ago as well. Again, we've been covering this in depth. Alex has other videos on it too. Let's go to that now.
I'm Darren McBreen with Infowars Nightly News, and I'm here today at the Texas State Capitol. And we're about to find out if the people of Austin are aware that they are about to be hit by a wave of utility bill hikes as new EPA regulations drive up the cost of energy. What do you think about paying higher utility bills because of the EPA's new regulations against power plants?
You know, there may be some new regulations coming up against power plants at this point, but unfortunately right now I think that our citizens statewide and nationwide basically are overburdened, especially with today's economic developments and situations that are going on. I think rate hikes should be at a minimal to at least try to alleviate some of the burden on our taxpayers and our citizens nationwide and statewide.
I know a lot of people that are going to be not only shocked but a little bit irritated about that as well. Sure. I mean, they're already, because it's such a hot summer.
Exactly.
You know, everybody's bills is already up through the roof.
You're already paying through the roof because the ACs are running nonstop, and then all of a sudden it's like, on top of that, and with a downturn economy, yeah, it's doesn't seem to jive that well.
Of course, I don't want to pay higher utility bills. They're already extremely high right now as it is.
Well, I don't want to pay more because of the carbon dioxide thing. That doesn't seem right, especially if it's not even proven.
Generally, I prefer regulations that deter pollution and paying a little bit more for that than an unregulated environment.
It all has to be regulated some way, right? It's going to mess our environment up.
I understand the tax on carbon footprints, but I mean, who's getting a new Lexus, you know what I mean?
Do you think that carbon dioxide is dangerous?
I think carbon dioxide can be very dangerous.
Okay, what do plants breathe?
Carbon dioxide.
Yeah, I think carbon dioxide is definitely dangerous. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any rules and laws to prevent it being.
What do plants breathe?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide is turned into oxygen by plants. So, it has to be in the world.
Obviously, it's not all dangerous. Carbon dioxide isn't a dangerous gas, but when there's too much of it, it's a problem.
Carbon dioxide, even though it's a natural gas consumed by plants, it can be dangerous because, everyone says it has to do with global warming.
Behind me is the Holly Street Power Plant. It was partially closed in 2004 and officially shut down in 2007. Now it's simply a reminder of Austin's energy independence. What do you think about the fact that General Electric, one of Obama's biggest donors, that they get a waiver and they will not be subject to the regulations?
That sounds like politics and lobbyists at work. It's government, right? Okay. No surprise.
Sounds plausible.
Yeah, it sounds possible. There's no surprise about that.
General Electric doesn't need any favors from anybody. They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Are you aware that some of these new regulations are also shutting down power plants, and this is causing some of the rolling blackouts throughout Texas?
No, I wasn't familiar with that, actually. Didn't realize that was going on.
Lobbyists make a lot of money striking these deals. There's a lot of things that we don't know, and how government, the tax breaks, the incentives, loopholes, you name it. So I think it's just one more to add to the list.
Well, as you can see, Alex, the people here in Austin, they're aware that their utility rates are going up, but they're not sure of the real cause. This is Darren McBreen with Infowars Nightly News.
And, of course, there's a lot more to discuss on that. Another story about energy, a dead heat crematorium to sell power for National Grid. Just kind of interesting. A crematorium is planning to become the first in the UK to generate electricity to sell the National Grid by using heat from its furnaces, off the dead, essentially. And it says the first phase, due to be completed early next year, will see a heat recovery system fitted to one burner, providing heat for the building. A second phase is planned, which then will see the installation of turbines on the other two burners to generate electricity. A series of open days are planned in an effort to get public support for the scheme. Now, another part that's interesting about that story is there's a story within that story. It talks about how many crematoria are currently replacing their furnaces to meet new government targets on preventing mercury emissions from escaping into the atmosphere, undeniably toxic. Up to 16% of all mercury emitted in the UK comes from the crematoriums because of the fillings in the teeth. Left unchecked, they predict it'll rise to 25%. The substance accumulates in air, water, is harmful to brains, kidneys, nervous system, and unborn children. So why are we allowing dentists to put it in our teeth? Good question. Other news about toxic substances. Kurt Nemo has detailed a new study, a 2011 study, proving fluoride causes brain damage. A study conducted by scientists in India demonstrates that consumption of sodium fluoride results in brain and neurological damage, published by K. Pratap Reddy of the University College of Sciences, Osmania University in Hyderabad, India. Now, we have some images from that study showing what actually happens to the nerve cells. We're going to pull that up right here. And on the left, you see undamaged, healthy nerve cells. And on the right, you see what happens under the conditions of fluoride, kind of a larger nerve cell on the left, smaller ones on the right. And you can find that report linked in Kurt's article on Infowars.com. But really, this stuff does have a powerful effect. We've had the experts on, Dr. Paul Khanna and others. So please look into that if you're not already informed. Meanwhile, it's not just fluoride they want to add to our water supply. Now there's yet another call to add lithium to the water supply, this time from a psychiatrist in Ireland who wants it added to the water, first in a small-town test, later to the whole country. And this person cites a British Journal of Psychiatry study from when they added lithium to the water supplies in many towns in Texas. He said there was already a strong precedent for governments intervening in the operation of public water supply for health benefits by adding fluoride, obviously dubious. Of course, that's not the first call for lithium. A quick review, many others have called for it. Fox News covered the mass drugging of society where they recommended putting lithium in the water. There was also a BBC report, Lithium in Water Curbs Suicide, again, based on a Japanese study advocating it be added to water. And a bioethics professor named Julian Salvesco says lithium should be added to the water, but that's just the beginning. We should have many other cognitive enhancements added to the water supply so our controllers can keep us passive and relatively dumb, unable to fight back against the system. That's all linked in a report I did in August 2010. So if you think fluoride's the end of the line, think again. They really want to mess with our water. So again, if you thought fluoride was the only problem in what's being added to our food and water, think again. Everything from GMOs to this lithium proposal on down is really just what happens when governments get extreme power, when power is centralized in the hands of a few, especially if they happen to be eugenicists. If you don't know about it, look up the Brave New World plan, Brave New World Revisited, Bertrand Russell, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the very people who help prescribe vaccines to the mass populations, the Center for Disease Control, have their own series of corruptions. One of the top executives there, a female scientist, was charged with child molestation and even bestiality. You may remember this report. We covered it a few weeks ago.
The suspects, Dr. Kimberly Lindsay and Thomas Joseph Westerman. Dr. Lindsay is the second in command at the CDC's Laboratory Science, Policy and Practice Program Office. Her career at the CDC has included oversight of a $1.5 billion terrorism preparedness budget. She's also been a top manager of HIV/AIDS prevention.
Now there's an update on that report. She is back at work. The senior government scientist facing child molestation and bestiality charges has returned to her high-powered job at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Georgia. And as the report mentioned, she helps oversee a very big terrorism contract. She's done work with AIDS and a whole lot of others. Her title is Deputy Director for Laboratory Science Policy and Practice Program Office. And generally speaking, that agency helps prescribe all the fun vaccines for your children, the list that gets longer and longer each year. Meanwhile, Fukushima news continues to get worse. ABC News in Australia reports that the fuel rods are now eating through solid concrete. Molten fuel rods at the Fukushima nuclear plant may have eaten two-thirds of the way through a concrete containment base, according to the plant's operators. What's worse, the operators' assessment comes about 6 months after international nuclear experts warned that molten fuel could eat through the containment vessel below the reactors. Of course, Alex has had on many of the experts, including Dr. Busby, discussing all the various fallout, no pun intended, or is it, I guess, on this terrible Fukushima tragedy and all the other terrible things they've been doing to our environment. We have to stop these dictators. Meanwhile, on the geopolitical front, after NATO's strike, Pakistan adjusts rules of engagement. They previously had orders to take orders before firing back, but now that's changing. Pakistan's commanders in the wild Afghan border region can return fire if under attack without waiting for permission, the Army chief said on Friday, a policy change that could stoke tensions after Saturday's NATO strike that killed